It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, back into another Monday. Our weekend rattled by way too fast. It might have been a great weekend for you, though, if you were looking at property. Maybe you signed the contract. Maybe it's all go between now and Christmas. Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it, getting in before Christmas? Of course, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, also Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon 7 days a week. And it's August the 26th today, and we've got a bit of a two-parter for you today and tomorrow. We're having a look at the Perth property market combined with Melbourne. Perth's severe shortage of property listings is pushing real estate investors to look eastwards, particularly to Melbourne. And with fewer than 2,000 houses available in Perth Metro, competition, as you could understand, is pretty intense and it's squeezing investors out of the market. If you take a look at June for this year, there was a dip in investor lending in WA after a high of $1.2 billion in May. And in Melbourne areas, properties are even more affordable, with property prices differing by as much as $100,000 compared to Perth. That might surprise you this morning. So let's catch up with Daniel McQuillan from New Wealth. And good morning to you, Daniel. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for having us.
So this will come as a bit of a surprise, I'm sure, to some people. And as mentioned, this is a two-parter and we'll be carrying this over into tomorrow. So you've been in the Perth property market for 20 plus years, two property cycles. So you would have seen a little bit in that time.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, certainly. We've been through the best and the worst of it. Obviously, post-COVID, the market has certainly performed far greater than I think even, the more experienced pundits may have imagined. That's put some pressure on some of the availability that we have here in WA at the minute, but it's been good for investors.
Okay, so this article that I was catching up with from Domain, fewer than 2,000 houses available in the Perth metro area. This probably hasn't come as a surprise because this has been sort of going on for some time now, hasn't it?
Yeah, massive shortages here in WA, and I think a lot of that is, was driven by stimulus that came off the back of COVID from the government to get people into housing, and there was a massive oversupply of product sitting in the Perth market to be absorbed at that point, and a lot of that was eaten up through first home buyer activity, first time investor activity, mums and dads sort of getting off the couch, taking advantage of stimulus and construction industry at that time. It exceeded what the government thought that it was supposed to do, and the market just started to run away from itself.
So tell us a little bit about what your situation is, because you're now eyeing more favourably Melbourne.
Yeah, so, we as a company here at New Wealth, working with our investor base, sitting down, assessing, our clients' portfolios, looking at their positions, they're in strong equity positions now due to the decisions that they've made. For us, we're looking at the availability for new product, the construction risks and the time to get product out of the ground. We've assessed, the Melbourne market, the Southeast Queensland market, and in particular looking at Victoria as becoming, very, very attractive. The economy over there is extremely robust. The product that is sitting on the market on the back of the supply that was put in place to meet demand in Victoria is allowing a lot of our investors to get in and buy, near new or all new properties, with tenants ready to go.
I think if you go back to the start of COVID, this wouldn't have been the prediction that a company like yours would be looking at Melbourne to start buying and advising.
No, definitely not. We were well and truly entrenched and set in the West Australian market, and we still are. There's still a lot of opportunity for our clients, in WA when we're sitting down and assessing the portfolios of the clients that we work with day in and day out, value for money. We're starting to look elsewhere, and the Melbourne market for us is starting to stand out.
All right, well, we'll come back in just a moment and talk more about the Perth property market, the Melbourne market with Daniel McQuillan. We're back after this.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.
And right now it is time for another property tip, and we are catching up with Ileana Rohantiri of Better Real Estate there in Canberra. And you've got another property tip for us this morning.
Another property tip indeed. I guess something which people do bang on about a bit, but the most important thing when out hunting for a property is to have your ducks in a row, have your finance ready to go. If you find the right property, you can jump on it straight away.
Yeah, we've talked about this because there's nothing more frustrating, because you don't want to put yourself into that frustration mode where you've found the ideal property and you're just not finance ready. And the whole thing with finance ready, there's a lot to that, and you must see that all the time.
We do, unfortunately. There was a couple of properties we've sold recently where we had a handful of buyers not quite ready to go. They loved it and they came back a few weeks later and they missed the opportunity. So not something you want to be put in if you're not ready.
And I think the other thing too with existing property owners is sometimes people will look at this bridging finance, which is really, you don't want to go down to the bridging finance if you can avoid that.
Correct. I mean, if it's avoidable, but if it means that you can transact and you're not having to rent in the middle or be homeless, certainly an option. You've just got to make sure you're working with a really reliable team that have got all their ducks in a row and they can make sure that you can transition from, one property to the next seamlessly.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day, from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
Here's an interesting one. While we wait for the RBA to cut the cash rates, and we wait and we wait and we wait, last week some of Australia's largest banks made headlines by selectively cutting interest rates. These cuts were not across the board. Some banks focused on term deposits, while others reduced home loan rates. Now, the move comes despite the Reserve Bank of Australia's decision not to lower rates anytime soon. They've been very clear with some of their signalling, and since August the 23rd, banks including the Commonwealth Bank, NAB and ANZ have reduced rates on term deposits. However, 15 banks have also increased rates on certain products. For mortgages, rate cuts were less widespread, with only 11 lenders reducing fixed rates and 5 adjusting variable rates, primarily for new customers. But I think the important takeaway is that the banks aren't waiting for the RBA. Some of them have decided to move, and hey, isn't that appreciated?
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week, only on the Real Estate Podcast.
All right, it is a Real Estate Monday and we are back with Daniel, who is in Perth, telling us that starting to look at the Melbourne property market. And let's just sort of reflect for a moment here, Daniel, over the 2024 year. How would you sort of sum all of that up in terms of what's been happening in the market?
It's been fantastic. I mean, what we see here, particularly, being based on the West Coast, is, we get a lot of traffic coming down from Singapore, Malaysia, people looking to relocate from the eastern states and other countries to take advantage of the employment that's here. So a lot of people moving into our state to taking advantages of jobs within the mining and the resource sector. But also, with post-COVID and in 2024, we've seen a resurgence now, a return of international students coming back into our universities. So it's a big country town, we call it. So it kind of feels as though in the last 2 or 3 years, this has really started to turn into a big international city.
And, of course, with everything that has happened in this year, let's have a look at Q1 for next year, 2025. Let's just project a little bit in terms of what you think might be happening by then.
Yeah, I don't see anything getting any easier here in WA. We can't build quick enough. Our population trajectory is holding strong. Our construction industry is just getting pulled, left, right, and centre. We don't, our building methodology over here still is double brick, although it's, it is changing. We are looking for, alternate construction methodology to be able to increase speed, but being able to get land, titled land to market through red tape is just taking far too long. So we know that the government and the industry bodies are meeting and doing everything that they can to try and expedite, the planning process and get more product out of the ground. We've got some really good developers and builders, over here trying to get some good mixed use product out of the market to meet supply. But there's a real issue, in WA, and I don't think that easy. And first quarter 2025, I don't see it being too dissimilar to what it is right now.
What about the surprise if you look at 2024? What has been maybe one of the biggest surprises for you?
The biggest surprise for me was, just how quickly the supply, it wasn't, we knew that the house and land product was getting eaten up very, very quickly, but the apartment market has been the huge surprise for me. So quality apartment, dwellings being constructed in and around Perth Central Business District, for 5 to 10 kilometres from the CBD, those types of product, which typically we are a big house and land type. We love our land here in the West where, we're very spread out. Everyone loves their big 4 bedrooms and their 3 bathrooms and their 2-car garage homes. But it's the mixed use, the apartment living that surprised me the most with the type of product that's now being, brought to market.
Now, I mentioned about that Q1 of 2025. In terms of those property developers, do you think by Q1 there's a little bit more activity going on?
Yeah, I can't see it. It's forecast that more land is being released, but there's just not enough. So whatever's being released, it's already spoken for. So the developers are doing their best. I think that there'll be a few more projects getting, approvals, but with construction the way that it is over here and the time it takes, I don't think it's going to be alleviated, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 next year at all.
So it all sort of just plays in the lane with exactly the way we set it up at the start, and that is people such as yourself looking at the Melbourne property market. As a result, just not enough supply in the chain. Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning and sharing all of that. Good luck moving forward and the run-up to Christmas.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us. Appreciate it.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
Canberra and Melbourne have been fascinating in terms of their market dynamics. What you normally find is Melbourne and Sydney price cycles follow one another quite closely. They're correlated, but that hasn't been the case. Melbourne has pretty much underperformed relative to all other capital cities.
Once I sold quite a little bit below what I'd hoped a year ago, the market was different, but I did get quite a few abusive emails from real estate agents after that, yeah.
I'll tell you what, the last 4 sales I've personally had over 3 million, they've all been from the Blue Mountains, every single one of them. And they're just moving from lifestyle blocks, acreage, homes that they built 20, 30 years ago.
And then we're seeing semi-detached cottages. Ashfield has also become a strong market where they've been in the high 1s to 2 for semis. And we're seeing a lot of those people sell and upgrade into houses to get into something larger.
The skyline is constantly changing, growing and expanding. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week.